what to expect. That's number one. So it's going to be a recorded session today. It speaks more participants that are online. So if at any point you're not wanting to be on the recording, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to send over the recording for you guys to be able to see if you don't want to actually be in the webinar today. So also, if you guys have any questions for anything at any point, the format that we're going to do today is I'm going to let you know exactly who I am, but also who some of our community partners are and what we're doing. If you have any questions, we'll take some pauses for both virtual as well as in-person questions throughout the presentation. But then we'll also do kind of a roundabout towards the end. And if you have any additional questions that have not been answered, we'll make sure to answer all of those for you as well. For our virtual participants, we have a Q&A that's down at the bottom. So if you participate in our Q&A, we do have some of our community partners that will work with answering your questions. If it's something that's more personal, we might have to pull you to the side, or you might have to sign up for one of our consultation slots. But if it's something that we can answer in the chat, make sure to do so and kind of pin it so you can see the answer. And the same for everybody who's in person. We'll try to go through all of the questions that are listed in the Q&A so that you guys get those answers as well. So again, also, if you can make sure to sign in, I would really appreciate it. And I'm also going to do a survey at the very end. We're going to do virtual survey. If you can let me know if there's anything you feel like we missed, any information you'd like to know more about. And then also we have physical surveys as well. So if you can make sure before you leave today, if you can fill that out, I would really appreciate it. So my name is Marion Davis, and I am with the Atlanta BeltLine Partnership. I am the program coordinator for our Empower program. The BeltLine, we have an Engage program and an Empower program. And our Empower program really focuses, we're a nonprofit organization, and that Empower program focuses on trying to make sure that we're helping those communities, specifically the ones that are legacy, what we call our legacy residents, people who have been in the community for long periods of time. We want to make sure that they're able to enjoy, you're able to enjoy the BeltLine as it continues to grow and enhance the community, but also stay in those communities as well. We also try to make sure that things like financial literacy, workforce development, and as well as reducing tax burdens and things of that nature, to make sure that we're all able to kind of just blend together, give as much information as possible, provide as much education as possible so that we can continue to thrive in those neighborhoods. We also have community partners that we work very closely with that help make this empowerment and all of this information possible. They're industry leaders. We have Fred from Grove Park and Roy as well. Then we also, who has helped us with Paradise Baptist Church. So we want to definitely thank you for allowing us to use the location. And then we also have Stacy and Carrie from Atlanta Legal Aid. They're going to be some of our powerhouses for giving you the information that you've come for your tax appeal process. So again, if you have any questions, please let me know. That's kind of my spiel. And I'm going to turn it over to Stacy so she can help you guys get as much information as possible and really get the process started for your tax appeal. So thank you again for coming.
Okay, and so I'm Stacy Reynolds. I'm an attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid and the Senior Citizens Law Project. And we created this project and partnered with Atlanta BeltLine Partnership and Grove Park Foundation very early. I'm going to try and get my PowerPoint started at the same time. And basically this was a way for us to try and help seniors stay in their home. And we realized that, it's not just seniors. So we've been doing this for a while to try and get the information out. I also have Carrie King, who's also with Atlanta Legal Aid here. And she's going to be sort of my my safety net. She's going to be the person that, answers a lot of the questions in the chat. She'll feed some of the questions to me as well. She'll also chime in as necessary when I start to wander or things need to be clarified or something added to what I'm saying. So, and Atlanta Legal Aid is also a nonprofit. We're basically a nonprofit law firm, and we represent people in all 5 of the counties, sort of the inside of Atlanta, the inside counties, I guess. But this project is really focused on Fulton County. So let's get started. We're here today to talk about trying to lower your property taxes, or at least trying to keep them from going up as much as we can. So the things that we're going to be talking about are, especially we kind of broke into 4 parts, and at each part we'll sort of pause and answer and get some more, get a chance for y'all to ask questions. So the first part is going to be why the tax assessments matter, because you all got your notice of assessment, and that's why you're here. So you probably already have an idea why they matter, but we'll talk about it a little bit more, and about what is it that impacts the taxes, ways to reduce the taxable value, and understanding what your assessment is. The second part, we're going to get into researching values, because a key part of reducing the taxable value is going to be finding an argument for that. And so we'll dig into how to do the research and how to figure out a value to assert in your appeal. The third part is going to be talking about submitting an appeal, and that's going to really get into the basics of filing an appeal and talk about online or paper appeals. And the fourth part is going to be what to expect after you file your appeal, because this is really just the beginning of a process that can take, it can actually take a year. So, I want to manage your expectations about how quickly these things will get resolved. Okay. So the truth about tax bills. We all know the tax bill. When you get the tax bill, you know what it is, that you need to pay it, and sometimes it's really scary. But really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is actually, what goes into the tax bill is the value, what the assessors say the value is, the rate, which is the millage rate or the tax rate, and that's going to be set by your elected officials, the county, city, and schools. And then there's a homestead exemption, and that's the piece that can reduce it. So to really understand how those things work together, you need to understand how the property taxes are calculated. The whole thing starts with the total value. The assessor is trying to guess what your house would sell for. And so they're trying to get what the fair market value would be. They don't, unless your house sold last year, they don't know what that value should be. So, so they're just, using data to try and figure that out. Let's say the total value they say your house is worth is $100,000. You get taxed on 40% of that total value. So in a $100,000 home, that's gonna be $40,000 of taxable value. From that, they subtract any exemptions that you are entitled to get. The example here uses a senior $50,000 exemption. It could be the basic $30,000, but that gets subtracted from the taxable value and then multiplied by the millage rate, the tax rate. And whatever that resulting number is, that's the amount of taxes you owe for that line item. Not all line items get exemptions, and so it's really important to keep an eye on that. We need to focus on both the value and the exemptions, because the lower you keep the value, the lower the taxable value is. The higher you get the exemptions, the more you're subtracting from that taxable value. So those are really the key things for lowering your property taxes. I do a whole presentation on homestead exemptions, usually in kind of the March timeframe, because the deadline for homestead exemptions is actually April 1st. And so today we're going to be focusing on the property tax appeals piece of this. And the reason for that is that we are right here. We are in the middle of the sort of property tax year. They've sent out the notices. The deadline is coming up. The deadline is going to be July 24th. And, a key thing to remember is that, by the time people get their tax bill, it's too late to appeal. So that's why you really need to focus on the notice of assessment when it comes out. So this is the notice of assessment, and this is the sample one from Fulton County, this year. And I imagine that all of you have looked at what you have, but let's talk about some specific things to look at. It's going to tell you the date it was issued And that's going to also give you the deadline for the appeal. You have to appeal within 45 days of the date it was issued. And that's the day it was issued, not the date you received it. So even if you didn't receive it, that you need to be aware of that deadline. July 24th is going to be the deadline for almost everybody. There's a small group that are going to get another notice of assessment if there's some error. And so they'll have a little bit more time, but you need to assume that your deadline is July 24th. The next thing you're going to look at when you're thinking about whether or not to appeal is the homestead exemption. If you apply for a homestead exemption before the deadline and it's not there, then you want to appeal that. So, and it's going to tell you yes or no for the homestead exemption. And if it says yes, it's going to give you a code. If the code is just HF01, that's the basic exemption. If that's what you applied for, then that's great. If you had the basic exemption and you were applying for like a senior exemption, one that you have to apply for as you get older, then and it just says HF01, then you want to think about appealing that. Now it's possible that they're still processing the applications, although they've tried to do much quicker this year. But there's still some that they're processing. But still, if you don't get the approval by July 24th, I would say appeal it just to be on the safe side. The next thing you're going to look at when you're thinking about appealing is the value. And of course, this is the key thing for most people. It gives you last year's value and what they're proposing for this year. And they're going to show that both in the 100% full value and the 40% taxable value. And so it'll give you an idea of what they're thinking the value has done. For the vast majority of people, that has just gone up. And probably for everybody that's come today, that's what's happened, because that's when you pay attention. If there's a jump in your value, you want to think about appealing, because that's the only way to be able to try and keep that in check. The other thing you want to take into account when you're thinking about appealing is the estimated tax. Now, this bottom part of the notice of assessment is just an estimate of what the taxes would look like with the new value. Your elected officials are busy setting what the millage rates are going to be for this year. So when they prepare this notice of assessment, they don't know what that millage rate is going to be. So what they do is they use last year's millage rate and the new value. But it gives you kind of a good benchmark of being able to compare last year's tax bill to what they're estimating the taxes will be. And so, if it doesn't affect your taxes, there's a big jump, but it doesn't affect your taxes that much, you may not want to appeal. I will say that I actually randomly picked this notice of assessment, but it actually ends up being a really good one, because this is someone who gets the senior exemptions, and you can see the estimated tax is really low. Or you can if you're not in the back of the room, I guess. And the problem is, if this person doesn't appeal, then probably next year she's going to go over that limit to start owing the school taxes, because school taxes don't have the floating exemption that some of the other parts do. And so, once the maximum exemption in the city of Atlanta for schools is $75,000. So you can see the 40% taxable value on this one is $73,300. It goes up another $2,000. She's paying school taxes, and that adds up very quickly. So, even if your taxes are pretty low, you want to keep an eye on what that value is doing, just to try and make sure that you don't have high taxes later. A couple other things to look for on here, because they'll come in later parts. It gives you the parcel ID number or property ID number. And then it also gives you a neighborhood code. And that's when they were looking at what the houses are worth, there's the old saying about location, location, location. They do that by the neighborhood. And what they think of as the neighborhood is not the same as what we think of. Like Grove Park has specific boundaries that we know. But the houses within that specific neighborhood are going to have often very different neighborhood codes. And so you want to try and look within the neighborhood code that they have to be able to pick comparable homes. Okay, so now I mentioned the floating exemption, and I get this question a lot, and I don't want to get too bogged down into it because I feel like we often do. But I want to address it because I think a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, we passed the value cap. Why do I need to worry about the value? And then they hear the word floating exemption. They're like, I don't know if that's what that is. And a floating exemption and value cap are the same thing. Basically, what was passed was that the value that the taxable value can go up from one year to the next can be no more than 3%. And so, as the property values skyrocket, the taxable value is going to take a much more modest increase. And it makes it easier for people to plan for, what their property taxes are going to be. And that's great, but it doesn't apply to all the all the categories. And we'll talk about that in a minute. What I get a lot of people confused about is how it shows up on a tax bill. And again, this comes to the difference between a floating exemption and the value cap. The way I think of the floating exemption is really a value cap, which would say, let's say in this example, the taxable value is 100,000. And let's say the base year, which is the year that locked in that, it's only going to go up no more than 3% from that base year each year. Let's say last year, that base year was 50,000. That means that the taxable value can only go up, at most $1,500 in that 1 year. So to me, the value cap says that it's the taxable value is $51,500. And from that, you subtract any other exemptions you get. But because the county treats it as an exemption, that extra money gets lumped into the exemption column instead of being subtracted from the assessed value column. But this is to show you the math that it's the same thing. That if you subtract the difference in value and then add it to the exemptions, that's what the floating exemption does. So it's the same thing. Now, one of the things that we'll be talking about today is that if you do your appeal and see it through to the end, you can actually get a 3-year freeze. And what that means is that the value can't go up for the next 2 years. This the year of the appeal plus the next 2 years to give you the full 3 years. And and that alone will save you some money. So the difference between a floating exemption and a freeze means that it doesn't have that small incremental increase. It's frozen. And then from that they subtract the exemptions and work it out to figure out what the taxes are. And you see the difference between the floating exemption and the freeze gives you a little bit of savings.
Stacey, a quick question. How do you
Yes.
determine the base year?
So the base year is going to be the year prior to when you start getting the homestead exemption. In Fulton County, there's a floating exemption on this part of the basic exemption. So as soon as you start getting the basic exemption, you start getting that floating exemption, and the base year is going to be that year prior to when you start getting the exemption. So if you locked in the base year when the values were high before the bubble burst, you may still be working back to that that base year, but over time it really can be a huge savings because the values have tended to creep up, and it can really, you see people whose values double or triple. Being able to have the taxable value only go up 3% can make a huge difference. Okay, so the problem, of course, is that, again, floating exemption does not apply to all categories of your tax bill. The main, it often doesn't apply to your bonds. And the big one is the school taxes. It does not apply to the city of Atlanta school taxes. And I think, as I alluded to, the highest exemption that a senior, a low income senior in the city of Atlanta is going to get for school taxes is $75,000. So the examples that I gave for the floating exemption versus value cap versus freeze, I used just the basic exemption for those. And you can see, the difference that it made for the taxes. For this example of the city of Atlanta schools, I actually used the highest exemption that a senior can get. And because that value got over that magic number and started, charging the school taxes, it makes a huge difference. It means that you're going to have to, basically, when the taxable value was 50,000, they didn't have to pay any school taxes. Once it went up to 75,000, the total school taxes that are going to be owed by the senior is $518. So that means that their tax bill goes up over $500 just because of that one difference. So that's, I get a lot of people questioning me about, well, I'm a senior, I shouldn't have to pay school taxes. That's not universally true, and certainly not true for the city of Atlanta if your value goes above a certain point.
So we have a question about how do I challenge it then?
Well,
The school taxes specifically.
yeah. So I guess you'd have to go talk to your elected officials about trying to get, better exemptions or finding ways to lower the millage rate or anything like that. But the key for us, the thing that we can do now is challenge that value. That if you can get the value, so again, in this example, we've got a $250,000 value for the home. If you can get that lower, that's going to lower that taxable value, the assessed value, and then that's going to end up lowering the amount of school taxes you have to pay. And the longer you can keep it below that, so the 75,000 taxable value translates into about 187,500 of full value. So if you can keep your house below that magic number for as long as you possibly can, that's going to help keep you from having to pay the school taxes for City of Atlanta. Some of the other school districts do allow for higher exemptions for seniors. Yes, Miriam.
And then I just wanted to see, does anybody in the room have any question that you would like to ask really quickly so far? Yes. She was saying you mentioned senior exemption. She feels like she has home exemption and she was saying that she doesn't see anything that's listed as floating exemption.
That's because it gets like hidden inside just the word exemption. And that's what that first example is for, is so that you can see that even though you don't see that floating exemption in your tax bill, it's there. It's just that it's sort of hidden by lumping that difference into your exemption instead of showing you that, hey, you got this value cap. To me, that's confusing, but that's the way the county tax bills are written.
Okay. So she was saying, does the homestead exemption take everything into account then? Or what are you saying is lumped into is that what you're asking? What is lumped into the homestead exemption? Or what's lumped into that floating exemption? Maybe I missed it.
Well, let me try and explain it this way. So what they have listed under exemption on your tax bill is going to be all of the exemptions you're entitled to get, or that you're entitled to get and have applied for. And what they're going to do is, let's say you get the basic exemption, which is 30,000, plus you get the senior exemptions, and they'll add that all together. And then in addition, they're going to add on that difference in value based on that base year. And so all of that gets added into the exemption and subtracted from the taxable value before they multiply it times the tax rate. So basically you get the benefit of all those things before it's taxed. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Yep, I think so.
Okay.
Do we have any other question in the room? All right, we'll continue.
We've got some online.
Okay.
Let's get back down here.
Yeah, someone posted in the chat, and I don't think I can respond in the chat. I think I can respond over Q&A. So if you ask a question in the chat, please just ask it in the Q&A. Somebody was asking again about the base year. It's the previous year, right, Stacy? The year before you apply?
Yeah. So let's say, so I said my example, I'm saying that last year was the base year. So basically, if somebody bought their house or applied for the homestead exemption this year, got the exemption this year, locked in last year's value, and that's how they ended up with the $50,000. But then this year, the value went up, so they they get the benefit of that floating exemption because of that difference. So let's say you applied in 2016. Well, then your base year is going to be 2015. That makes sense?
One more in question. She was asking, what is the difference between the senior exemption versus the homestead exemption?
So they're all homestead exemptions in the sense that all of them require it to be your homestead. But a person can get a homestead exemption for their home, their primary residence that they own or have a claim to ownership on. They can get that regardless of age or income or anything. That's just by that being their homestead. They get the exemptions if they apply for them. There are additional exemptions that are available for people as they age at 62, 65, 70. Also for people who, disabled veterans, people who are disabled can get the senior exemptions at a younger age. There's a whole variety of other exemptions. And again, we do a whole session on this in March. So I'd encourage you to either look for the video for that and look at the one that we did this past March, or tune in next year. Because I'll definitely be trying to get the word out, especially because I feel like there are a lot of people who are inheriting their homes, dealing with legacy home ownership issues that really should be getting exemptions that they're not currently getting. So tune in later. Okay, so I'm going to move on so that we can, really cover the appeal piece.
Okay, hold on. I have just one more. I think it's about the exemption as well. Oh, she's asking if it was fair for her to assume that the tax assessor will know the exemptions that that her tax preparer will know the exemptions that she should qualify for, and then apply on her behalf, I believe.
But her tax preparer is probably preparing her income taxes. They don't usually do the property taxes. So, she's probably going to be, she needs to double check with her tax preparer, but she's probably going to have to be the one to apply for the homestead exemptions because she's going to be the one that has to deal with the property taxes.
Right.
Okay. So let's get into appeals. There are 3 grounds for appeals.
I'll answer you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stacey.
Okay. The first one is uniformity. And this is basically a fairness argument. The tax assessor is supposed to uniformly assess taxes. And if it's not uniform, then it's not fair. That somebody is paying more taxes than they should. Now, this isn't based on the amount of taxes you pay, because some people get higher exemptions and that's why they pay less. What they're looking at is whether that taxable value before all the exemptions is uniform. And so they want to look and see if the values that the assessors are putting on the houses is roughly the same for similar homes. If they're not, and especially if there are homes that are similar to yours that are being assessed lower, then you would want to appeal based on uniformity. The second one is value, and value actually has two different options, sort of. One is if the condition of your home is not what they say it is. If you look in the property records and it's saying that your house is bigger or better than what it actually is, then that's a value appeal. You can appeal that and say, no, it should be, these things should be downgraded to reflect the true condition of my home. And that will lower the value. The other one is sales. So if, for the most part, they're trying to guess what your house would sell for. And it would have, what it would have sold for as of January 1st of this year. So what they're going to look at is the sales from last year and try and guess from those sales what somebody would have paid for your house. Again, they're guessing. And so you want to look at what sales they had from last year to see if there are some that make an argument for a lower value, or distinguish the ones that they're saying are comparable to yours by pointing out that they're homes that have been fixed up, or have a bigger area or more bathrooms, or whatever it is. You want to be able to show that sales support a lower value for your home when you're arguing a value appeal based on sales. But again, the sales are from last year, and for uniformity, you're going to want to look at what the assessors say the values are for this year. The third ground for appeal is an exemption denied, and this is just pretty straightforward, that if you apply for an exemption and you did not get it and you should have, that's an exemption denial appeal. So that's basically going to be just you arguing that, these are the reasons why I should have gotten that exemption. So tax appeals are a place to argue for a lower total value that will then translate into a lower taxable value. So again, this is where, it's your elected officials that decide the millage rate, whatever homestead exemptions you're going to get, it's too late to apply for them. So really the key to lowering your tax bill right now is going to be trying to keep that total value as low as possible. You do have to appeal within 45 days of when the notice of assessment is made available. That date does change from year to year, so don't assume that whatever time frame you had last year is the same as this year. In fact, this year's is like a week earlier than last year. Like they've been kind of pushing farther and farther into getting later and later, and then suddenly they turned it around. So we're kind of scrambling. But so it's 45 days from the date the notice of assessment is made available. And for almost all the Fulton County residents, that's going to be July 24th this year. The value freeze is really a huge win. Again, if you appeal and you see the appeal through to the Board of Equalization hearing, or if you agree, you reach an agreement with the assessor's office to a certain value, then it locks in what they call a 299 freeze, and 299 is just the citation that allows that value to be locked in for the year it was the year of the appeal and the 2 years following. And so, even if you show up for the Board of Equalization hearing and you lose, they're by and large, they're not going to be able to argue for anything higher than what's in the notice of assessment. Unless you bought the house last year, or appealed, you're appealing an appeal value, they're not really going to be able to go up. So, so that 3-year freeze it could be a win in itself. Even if you lose the appeal, you get that 3-year freeze. And there's not that much risk because they really can't raise it above what's in the notice of assessment, which is what you'd be stuck with if you didn't, see the hearing, the appeal all the way through. Now people hear Board of Equalization hearing and they think, oh, scary, something like a judge, something like that. The Board of Equalization is really not scary. It's just 3 individuals who are also taxpayers, just like you, who have a little bit of training on how to evaluate these cases. And then basically they just sit there and listen to you and the appraiser talk about what the value should be. And then they decide somewhere, either between those 2 values or for one or the other. It's not a real formal hearing. It's not like you're going up in front of a scary judge or, even a scary set of judges. It's just a conference room with the people, talking. The hearing is our tax appeals generally are the place to present evidence that supports a lower value, especially when you're at the Board of Equalization stage. You want to be sure that that you have some sort of evidence to hang your hat on for convincing the Board of Equalization to do a lower value. Because if they don't, if you just go in there saying, I can't afford the taxes, there's not anything the Board of Equalization can do about that. They need something to be able to show that the value should be lower. Yes, Marion?
One second. About uniformity. Is that meaning what square footage, bedroom, bathroom, what counts in the uniformity argument?
We're going to get into that a lot more a little bit later. So let me hold that question. And then, if they need more at that point, we'll dig back into it. Okay.
Okay. One more question, 2 more questions. Hold on. For the value freeze. Let's say you lose at the Board of Equalization, or you lose the value for whatever reason. Do they backtrack taxes and put on your future taxes? Like if you applied for the appeal, they freeze your taxes for the 3 years. Will they backtrack the amount of taxes that you owed for the last 3 years on your next?
Oh, I get it. Yeah, no, they will not. That's so basically you'll be taxed at that value for the following, for the 3 years involved. And then on that 4th year, they're not going to go back and charge you any taxes from the prior years. But what they will do, and what we've seen, unfortunately, make a big difference, is they will increase to the fair market value that in some cases has increased tremendously each of those years. And so that you can see a big jump there that, they, say the value of or the decision of the Board of Equalization was that the value should be 100,000. Then you get that 100,000 and you're taxed it on, a value of 100,000 or 40,000 taxable value for the 3 years involved. But then on that 4th year, they're going to go back and say, well, the following year, the value went up 50,000. And then the next year it went up 50,000. And then this year it went up 50,000. So they're going to add another 150,000 to the value of the home. And so you need to appeal again. The bottom line is if you appeal every 3 years, you can try and manage that.
All right, one more question from the room. It's piggybacking on the freeze. If you appeal again after the 3 years, and then you turn into an age 70 where you get a senior exemption. Oh, okay. So she was asking after the value freeze, if you go and you reappeal and now you're getting a senior exemption, is there anything additional that you need to do outside of applying for the senior exemption for that year? Is that what you're asking about? I'm sorry. So after the value freeze, so her question was, after the value freeze of the 3 years, and you go back and you reappeal, SAC in this particular example, then you, in that time that you're reappealing, you've turned 70, so you're now qualified for the senior exemption. Is there anything that you would need to do outside of applying for the senior exemption to show that you should have, I guess, received those exemptions in the year of the freeze?
Yeah, so, and this goes back to what we were saying, that the value is gonna affect the taxable value. And so during that freeze, that taxable value isn't gonna go up. And then from that taxable value, they're gonna subtract any exemptions. So once you get that senior exemption, it'll be subtracting more than what they were, before you got that exemption. And so, having appealed, that keeps your value down, which keeps the taxes down. And then getting an additional exemption lowers the taxes even more. And so then when you appeal again, that's just controlling that value, and you still get that exemption subtracted from it.
Thank you. What she's saying is that the value on the tax bill and the exemptions are two separate kind of categories. So what you're freezing is the value of the property that they're going to be taxing you on, and what you're wanting to apply for is the exemption they're going to subtract from that, or as your exemption. They're giving you like the exemption for senior, but that's not going to necessarily affect the value of the property.
Yeah,
if you have more questions about that particular part, I can help you after in the next. That's okay? Okay. Cool.
I mean, just to reiterate that, so let's say again, you appeal, your frozen value is 100,000, you're gonna be taxable at 50,000, at 40,000. And suddenly you get the senior exemption, the basic senior exemption is 50,000 for some parts of the bill. And so, the first year of the freeze, you didn't have it, so you paid some taxes on that. But then the second year of the freeze, you did have it. You're not going to pay any taxes on that category. And then, the third year, it'll be the same. But the fourth year, you're going to need to keep that value down again to keep getting that full benefit from the for the exemption taking care of all of the taxes. Okay. So the tax appeal, so I got this off Facebook, and I apologize. I don't know where to attribute it to. I feel kind of bad, but I thought it was a really good graphic for what we're talking about. Basically, what you're trying to do in your appeal is argue that the value should be more like what your house, the modest house that you have, instead of the grand palace that the tax assessors think you do. So you want to be able to present some sort of evidence that's going to be able to convince the Board of Equalization that the value should be much lower. Okay. So
Stacey, we got disconnected for like 2 seconds.
Okay.
So did we just, hold on 1 second. So we just want to make sure we didn't miss a slide, but you were just showing us about the evidence that needs to be in your supporting.
Well, basically, I was just explaining that the goal of this is to present some evidence that shows that the home is a much more modest home that it is versus the grand palace that the assessors seem to think it is. So, this is the visual of what you're trying to do as we move into how to do the research. What we're going to talk about in this next section is what are you looking for and where do you look to find it? This is, where are you going to dig? This is what I was telling you to hold off on the uniformity. So when you're doing the research, you want to think about the grounds for appeal, because that's going to sort of direct what you're going to be looking for. So in uniformity, you're going to be looking at what the assessors say the values are for other homes in your neighborhood code for the same year that you're appealing. So you're going to look for the 2023 values for the homes in your neighborhood. And you're going to be wanting to look for similar homes. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Uniformity, I kind of think of it as like hunting for Easter eggs, because you're really looking for that random house that just happens to be, undervalued, and being able to say, hey, this is a uniformity problem, and so my house should be as low as this one. And in some cases, you're the one that actually has the sky high value, and you can say, well, this should be much lower than it should not be nearly as high. So with the uniformity, you're going to be thinking about similar homes, roughly the same age, roughly the same size, roughly the same bedrooms, bathrooms, that sort of thing. For value research, you're going to be looking at the sales in your neighborhood code, but they've established the value of what they think it is as of January 1st. So the sales that have happened this year are going to be counted for next year. So you want to focus on the sales for last year when you're trying to figure out ones that will work for arguing for a lower value. Finding sales in a really hot real estate market can be kind of tricky, but you can find them. Especially if the condition of your home is not as good as the sales that are happening, you can make the argument that that's not really what my house would sell for. The value, again, you also want to consider the condition of your home and whether or not it's as good, or it has all the same amenities that the assessor's office says that your house does. So especially for that last part, you're going to want to review the property information that the tax assessors have. And I'm going to talk about where to find that in a minute, but you want to think about, is this information accurate? Look at the square footage. If they have a much larger square footage than what your house really is, then you want to challenge that, because that makes a difference in the value. If the quality of construction is lower, there are problems with, with the quality of your home, that's a place you can challenge. The condition utility, CDU is the term that appears in some of their information, and others it just refers to as condition. But this is, if there's damage to your home, especially structural problems or, water damage or flooding, those can really impact the value. And so those are things that if they have that your house is excellent and it really isn't, then you can challenge that and get that lowered, and that can make a difference in the value. Think about accessory buildings. If they show that you have accessory buildings that either you never had or that they got torn down, a few years ago, you can say, these are things that y'all have that show additional value that I don't have. The HVAC system can make a big difference, and especially the numbers of bedrooms and bathrooms, especially bathrooms, as well as finished basements and things like that. You want to see if they have the right information about your property. And if they don't have the right information, that's going to be a value appeal. You need to be sure to think of it that way. The other reason you want to review the property information that the assessors have is you want to gather the information about your house so that you can compare it to other houses. Because you're going to want to compare your house to similar homes. And so that's the question of, well, what is similar? If you're in a neighborhood where all the homes are roughly the same, it's going to be easy to say these are all similar. Again, roughly the same size, same age. If you're in a neighborhood of all 1950s brick ranch homes, any of those are going to be similar. But if you're in a neighborhood where you're sitting next to houses that are very different from yours, it's not as easy, they're not equal. There's no way to say those are equal. But sometimes that's what you have. You don't have the luxury of being able to look at all of your neighbors and say, well, these are all very similar to me. So sometimes you're kind of stuck with comparing your home to, maybe something that's much larger. And a way to be able to make them more similar is to use a price per square foot. And I'll talk about this in a minute, but they've made it much easier to do a price per square foot. So it actually can be a very useful tool, and I think they've recognized that. So price per square foot is basically, what somebody would pay per square foot of the home. And so you divide the value by the square footage of the home. And that's how you figure out the price per square foot to make it more similar. So you've got in mind, you've got that you need to figure out what your home is and then compare it to others. So the first place you start when you start doing the research is you start looking at your home. And the Fulton County has actually upgraded their system this year. And I have to say, I am absolutely so excited about it. They now have actually 2 ways to search your property. They call it the enhanced property search and the basic property search. So if any of y'all have done this in the last few years, the basic property search is what they have had for the last few years. The enhanced property search has some enhancements that I think are really great especially for people who are trying to do these appeals on their own. So you want to go to fultonassessor.org. You want to look at the quick links. I suggest that you start with the enhanced property search, but you can start with the basic property search and then move to the advanced property search for the comps. Either one is going to have the basic information about the property. So if you start with the advanced property search, the first thing you're going to get is this, looking for the search method. One of the reasons I've always liked, so this is the QPublic system, which is one that they used several years ago. It's before they switched to the one they now call their basic property search. And what I always liked about this system is that it's more predictive. So when you start to type in like the owner's name, it tries to guess who you're talking about. And so it'll give you suggestions. And so that can help you with finding the property that can sometimes be more difficult in the basic property search because their search is more persnickety. But basically you just put in, it's you search by the owner's name, his last name, first name, search by the address, it's, the number and then the street, search by the parcel number. That's the parcel ID number that I pointed out on the notice of assessment. You don't have to do all 3. You can pick whichever one you want, pick it, look for your property. Once you find your property, it's going to go to a property page. This is all, in the enhanced property search on QPublic, it's all going to be one page. So you're going to start at the top and you're just going to scroll down. And when you're scrolling down, you're going to be looking at the information they have about your property. To try and get it kind of, so you can see the different information, I've split it so that the bottom part comes up here to the top. But you can see that it has a lot of property information about your home. And so you can look at, is this all accurate? You can also compare the size of the lot, is your land size accurate? Now, another thing you can see here is the history of the value, and that's less important for your home than for when we're looking at comps. And especially, so the one flaw in the enhanced property search is that it does not allow you to see that somebody has appealed. So you don't know if they've appealed and they're actually in one of the 3-year freezes. So one way you can kind of guess that that's the case is if it looks like the values are the same, like for this year and last year, or this year, last year, and the year before. Especially in that case, you're going to kind of assume that that probably was an appeal. And so that makes a difference when you're talking the uniformity argument. But so basically you've got this great, just one page of this is all the information about your property to be able to figure out if they have the information right. You also want to gather up the information that they have so that when you're comparing it to other homes, you know what it is you're looking at. And if you keep scrolling down, if you didn't get your notice of assessment, or if you can't find it, you can find it here. So again, you just keep scrolling down on the same page for your property, and you come to this button, you just click that button and it'll download the assessment so that you can see the notice of assessment again. The best thing, and this is the enhanced part of the enhanced property search, is this button over here. I can't tell you how excited I am about this button. Basically, you click this button, it says start comp search, and boom, it starts the comp search. It makes it so much easier. All the information about your home and all the categories that you can use to manipulate the search is all listed here on the right-hand side. And it defaults to some of the key information so that it automatically selects neighborhood, because you're only going to want to look for properties in the same neighborhood code, unless you're on an edge of a code. But I would always start with doing your neighborhood code. So it automatically defaults to having that. It also automatically defaults to class, and whatever. I don't feel strongly about that, so we'll just leave it. And then it also automatically defaults to sales for sales research. And I think that's what they're really kind of aiming people to do. But for the uniformity, what you would do is just uncheck that box. If you're going to do the value research and you do want sales, then you want to leave it checked. And I would suggest switching it from 1 year to giving the dates, so that you're giving the actual dates, so you capture all of 2022 instead of just, the last calendar year. You can also, limit the search with some of the other categories, so that you can do it, similar square footage or bedrooms, bathrooms, that sort of thing. You can. But again, one of the enhancements in the new enhanced search is that you don't have to. You can do a very wide open search and hit search, and it's going to give you all of the properties in that neighborhood code that were sold in 2022. And that's it can be a little overwhelming, but I'll talk about how to narrow that some. So, once you hit that button, it's going to come up and it's going to have your home at the top. And then it's going to have all the homes that were sold in 2022 below it. And you can just scroll down and you can look at the different properties. And you can actually use this list to look at the properties just by clicking the pin. That first column is the parcel ID number. Or you can scroll down to the very bottom and download the list. So you can actually download it as an Excel spreadsheet or as CSV, and be able to then, have it in a format where you can sort it and play with it. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I also want to hit on one of the other enhancements of the enhanced property search. And I think this is going to be really helpful for people who are trying to do the appeals on their own. You can create your own exhibit. And it's, as you're going through the properties and you're picking the ones that you think are going to be good comparables to argue for a lower value, you can just check them on check the little box next to them. And you can check up to 5 and then hit this button that says generate comparable properties report. And it will actually create a properties report. It'll actually create a document that includes a chart that shows your house with the other houses that you've selected, all a bunch of the different relevant pieces of information, and it will attach the full all that, like, 1-page information that you scroll down. They'll have all of that for each of the properties that you've selected, and so it can be a really great tool for creating that exhibit. When you go into the Board of Equalization, you can say, see, this is why my property should be lower. And that is evidence that they can hang their hat on. So it's a great little tool. But if you don't want to go through and click each of these properties, and you don't want to miss anything by limiting the search too much, if you download the list, what you're going to come out with is kind of overwhelming. It's going to look like this. The very first line is going to be your property. I actually added that highlight because I like having that, because once I sort the page, I'm going to want to be able to find where my property is again, without too much work. And the amazing thing that they do in this is they actually have added columns for that price per square foot. The first one I lit up, the price per finished square foot, is basically the sale price divided by the square footage of the home. And so these are, again, what this search is basically all the homes that were sold in 2022 in this neighborhood code. And so it's going to give the price per square foot for each of those sales. The other column that I've highlighted on the right-hand side is the price per square foot based on what the assessors say the value is. And so, again, you can sort by that for the uniformity argument. It makes it so much easier. And if you sort, you can see which properties actually have a lower price per square foot than yours, and that can help you narrow down which ones you want to look at. And you can just look at the ones that are with a lower price per square foot. Now for sales, I would ignore the ones where the price per square foot is 0 or even very low, because those are generally going to be somebody transferring the home to their wife or whatever. But you can start looking at the ones that are lower than yours, but not unrealistically low, because for sales it needs to be a fair market transaction. It needs to be arm's length. The buyer needs to be willing to buy, the seller needs to be willing to sell, and there's no collusion going on. And so yes.
And I just wanted to also take the moment when she's going over some of the evidence that you will need to support the argument or the appeals for this process. I do want to let you guys know, for both the virtual and in person, we do have consultation sessions that are available as well. And those will be offered. We have 3. So we have one that's coming up on the 15th, which is this Saturday virtually. We have one coming up on the 19th, which is on Wednesday, as well as the 22nd, which is on another Saturday. And in these sessions, we will have volunteers that have helped or that are helping us to help you upload your evidence, upload your information. We have volunteers who are going to help us through this particular process, finding what she's talking about, the comparables, so that you can support it with evidence. So we'll have people as well that can help you with that, create that for you, and help you upload all the evidence that you need to actually submit your application on this process. So again, I'm going to send out an email as well. That email will have the dates. It'll have the registration links, which is via Eventbrite, as well as like on Zoom. And then it'll also have like the time and location. And then also, if you feel like you could volunteer or help us to just help people upload their document or information, again, we have some bandwidth to help you like actually go through the process of creating the comparables. But if you feel like you can help volunteer with other seniors or people who are not maybe as technologically savvy, we would definitely appreciate you coming out to help volunteer with us in that space as well. So there's room for that, but also room for the consultations. I just wanted to kind of plug that in to let you know that that will be available should you feel that the process is a little daunting. We're here to help.
Yeah. And I love the plug, and I will say, when we have the people who are pre-registered, we will have some of this already prepared for the person. But I also want to say, it looks a little scary, but if you play with it, it actually is a pretty easy thing. It just, it takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to what you're looking at. But really anybody can do this. If I can do it, anybody can do this. So you've sorted by the price per square foot. You could also sort by the value price per square foot. Once you've got it sorted, you're going to sort of eyeball and compare the important pieces of information to look for similar homes that have a value that would be, a good argument for a lower value. And so you sort of look at the square footage, the bathrooms, the condition, the quality of the construction, all these things that, play into what is similar. They have it on this spreadsheet, so it makes it very easy to be able to go through and say, you know what, I think these are going to be the ones that are really good comparables. The one thing that the spreadsheet doesn't have, well, two things it doesn't have. For sales research, it does not have whether the sale was a valid or qualified sale. So you may want to look at the property to, the information about that property to be able to confirm whether it was a valid sale. And if it wasn't, why was it not considered qualified? Because sometimes, if it's not an arm's length transaction, then it's not qualified. But if, sometimes they'll say it's not qualified because it was remodeled after sale. Well, that's relevant to, whether that property should get the benefit of the sale value. It's not really relevant to, whether it's a good comparable, because if your home is also one that would need to be renovated after sale, that sale is more like what your home would sell for than the homes that were sold after they were renovated. So, so you can make an argument for, an unqualified sale. The other thing this does not have is, whether or not it was subject to a freeze. So when you're doing the uniformity comparison, when you've sorted by the value per square foot column, you want to kind of double check to see, if this value was because of a freeze. And the reason you want to think about that is that, if it's a frozen value, it's not technically a 2023 value. Technically, it's the value from whatever year it was appealed. So, but this is an easy way to, you can get all the data and still be able to narrow it down to something that's manageable. You can also, again, in the search, you can limit it so that it's not going to be all of the houses that sold. It could be just all the houses from the 50s that sold, that were built in the 50s. You can find a way to narrow it if you want to. I like having all of it there, and I just eyeball it to, ignore the ones that are not similar. So again, you can search by the value per square foot for the uniformity. So the other, again, there are two search processes. That's the enhanced property search. And again, once you pick a comp that you want to look at, you can actually go back and do the search for that property to look at, all the information it has about that property. Or you can go back over to the FultonAssessor.org website, look at the two options for the appeal for the property search, and this time select the basic property search. And that's going to again give you the opportunity to choose which search field you want to use. The owner search, parcel search, or address search are going to be the main ones if you're looking for a specific property. Advanced search is going to be for more like what the enhanced search does, where you're trying to get a whole bunch of properties. But it's much more limited, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And so, so you can use that to pull up, your home or any other home that you're wanting to look up. That's going to give you all of the same information that you have in the enhanced property search, information on that property, but it does it in a different way. You're going to actually click through the little menu to figure out where things are. It does include the notice of assessment. I was so excited about the enhanced property search that I didn't get around to changing this screen front. So this, even though this is a screen print from last year, it actually, this year it does have the 2023 instead of, it's the 2022 and 2023 notice of assessment. But anyway, so you can get the notice of assessment here as well as on the other one. And then, for getting the property information, you're just going to click through all the different categories and look to see what information they have about the property. One of the big benefits of this process, or this search engine versus the enhanced one, is that it does have the appeals information. So if you're wondering about whether or not the value that you're wanting to rely on was an appealed value, this is where you can look for that. So basically, you look up that property, click on appeals history, and it'll tell you if there was an appeal from the last 2 years. You can also use this to look at sales. You can see there's a sales button to be able to look at what sales they've had. And so that can help you figure out if it was a qualified sale or not. Or you can look on the enhanced search. You can search for that property in the enhanced search and it'll have sales information in it. So
sorry, Stacy, can you, I've got one question that it relates to that search mechanism. So the property report card used to be available and someone asked, is there a way to get that now?
Yeah, let me go back. So here where you find the notice of assessment, you also see residential PRC. And again, even though this is outdated, that thing is still there. So you can use the basic property search to actually get your residential PRC, the property property.
So Stacy,
card.
I just looked up one on Fulton Assessor and I don't see it there. It looks like they took it away.
And you did that because in the Board of Assessors meeting just the other day, he was saying, hey, this is still the way you're going to be able to do it.
Let me pull another property. It's like what I'm seeing now is mailing list attribute export 2022 real estate notice 23 and then the business PP notices.
Well, so if you want to get that, the other way you can do it is, on your notice of assessment, it has contact information for the appraiser. You can contact that person and they should be able to give you the property card as well. I'm very disappointed though, because he had said basically that it was still going to be available this way and through your appraiser. So
yeah, it's weird. I don't know when they took it off because I thought it was going to be available as well. Also, just real fast, somebody was asking about where to find the neighborhood code. In that screen that Stacy has, you can see it right there listed as neighborhood. So if you look up your property, you can find it. It's also on your notice.
Yeah, so the neighborhood code is here, and then also in the enhanced search. And I didn't point it out when we were looking at it, but one of the fields that I had highlighted in that enhanced search, when it pulls up your property, it's actually right up at the top. It'll have the neighborhood code there as well. So, I mean, literally everything that's in one system is also in the other, with the exception of the appeals history. Okay. Move to advanced search. So I just want to touch on the advanced search because I really think the enhanced search has made the advanced search just not even worth trying. Basically, the advanced search is very similar to the enhanced search in the sense that you can, just enter, without having to specify a particular property. You can do a neighborhood code for the sales. You can do the sales date. And you can just sort of narrow by certain things and do a search and get all this information. And when you download it, it comes up with a spreadsheet that's similar to what I just showed you. It shows you all sorts of information, but it's so much more limited. You really do have to narrow it in order to even get to something that you can look at. You have to have less than 250 hits for it to even give you, the full, all the things that you've got that your search returns. And then you have to get it down to 100 to be able to download it. So, and the only way to be able to see some of the relevant things to be able to figure out what you can look at is to do the show and results. And then even then it only gives you a few columns. It doesn't give you as many columns as the enhanced search does. So I no longer love this. I never really loved it. It was better than what we had before. Now the enhanced search just blows it away. But if you do want to use this, you can download things. Once you get it under 100, you can download it by using select all, attribute export, and hit go. You can also do research just by using the map, and both systems have a map where it'll highlight the subject property. And then you can just click around to the other properties to see what information they have about the other properties, looking at sales or value and that sort of thing. And so you just kind of click around, and that's kind of your chance to look for an Easter egg. That can be kind of a fun, kind of cathartic little thing of just like clicking around and checking what your neighbor's value is. I'm in DeKalb County, but that's basically what I ended up making when I had to appeal this year, and I basically did it based on my neighbors. So depending on the situation, it may be the best way to be able to make your argument. And some people are more comfortable doing this other than dealing with spreadsheets or lists or whatever. Either one is fine. It's whatever works for you. There's no like set way to make your argument. Really what you're doing is just trying to think about what argument can I make to argue for a lower value. Yes, Marion?
Yeah, and then I just wanted to see for our last 10 minutes, I wanted to open up a little bit more for some questions to see if anybody had some questions.
Before we do that, can I hit one or two more slides?
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Since we've done some questions, I want to make sure that people understand that what you can bring as evidence is not really limited. It's just you need to think about what would be a good argument for a lower value. So you can bring all sorts of other things. If you have a recent appraisal that shows that the information is different or that the value is lower, you can bring that. If the recent appraisal is higher than their value, you probably don't want to raise that one. Photographs are great, especially if you have some sort of condition issues. You got cracks in the ceiling, cracks in the floor, holes, water damage, anything that's not visible from the street, or even things that are visible from the street that they haven't picked up on. You can bring photographs of that to show it and support what you're saying about your home. Repair are great for showing that, if somebody was buying my home, they would deduct this from the value before they would buy it. And so you can, argue that should be deducted. And then Google Street View and internet searches can help you with getting more information about sales in the neighborhoods and say, these are not what my house would sell for. Some words of caution: you want to beware of frozen values. You want to avoid uninhabitable properties unless your property is uninhabitable. You can't really argue that the home that's falling in is, a good comp for yours, because it's just not really similar unless yours is also falling in. You want to try and use valid or qualified sales, but if you can't, just be ready to justify what you're using. And keep in mind that affordability is not a ground for lowering the value. So I also just want to submitting an appeal. The deadline is July 24th. Where to appeal? You can appeal online. You want to save the confirmation page if you appeal online. You can appeal by mail. You do want to do it in a way that you can prove that you send it in before the deadline. It needs to be postmarked on before the deadline, and you want to be able to confirm that they received it. And then you can also submit it in person, and that can be either at this address or any of the annexes, so any of those properties. Appealing online versus a paper appeal. The online appeal is better for being able to get instant proof that you actually did submit it. So you can confirm that you submitted it on time. A paper appeal is necessary for a paper appeal. If you don't have an email address, then you're not going to be able to do the online appeal, because you have to set up an account, and setting up an account requires an email address, or at least someone who's willing to let you send an email to them and they can click a link to be able to set up the account. But so there are people that are not going to be able to do that. And then the other thing about paper appeals is that if you are appealing the homestead exemption, and value and or uniformity, you can't do both of those online. You have to do one of those, at least one of those on paper appeal. You can do all three in a paper appeal, but if you're doing that, you're going to need to be sure that you have proof that you actually did submit it. And he was out on being able to go back and check online. This is the paper appeal. I'm going to actually skip ahead. You can find the appeals, the online and the paper appeal on the FultonAssessor.org website, looking under appeals. The online services, you click, you're gonna have to log in. I'm gonna run through to how to appeal. Want to get to the page. Yes. So in both the paper appeal and the online appeal, you're going to need to designate with grounds for appeal, the homestead exemption denied, value, or uniformity. You're going to need to say what appeal process you want. We recommend Board of Equalization because it's free and it's available for any type of appeal, as opposed to arbitration or hearing officer. You need to assert some value, and that value I suggest at this stage to be low, because you can argue later if you decide you can't support the value that you've asserted, you can argue for a different value later, and it can be either higher or lower. But there's an 180-day rule that if they don't process your appeal within 180 days, you win whatever value you put down. So that's why it should be as low as possible, basically, within reason. And then we advise that you do 85% of the value for the temporary tax bill. So that way you'll be, your tax bill that comes out while you're appealing will be based on either last year's value or 85% of this value. The big thing I want to point out on this screen though, is that if you get to the screen in the online appeal, it's going to say, the first thing you're going to see at this top for grounds of appeal is just homestead exemption denied, yes or no. You won't even see the value and uniformity appeal unless you say no. And so that's, again, you can't do both online. You're going to have to choose one or the other to do online. And then the other is going to need to be a paper appeal. You need to file those separately or do it all as paper appeals. Okay. You do not have to upload any documents at this stage. You do have to provide evidence at the Board of Equalization hearing, but you don't have to. But you do need to make sure that you hit submit before on or before July 24th. If you don't hit submit, then you're not done. And you want to make sure that when you hit submit, you get the confirmation page. So if you're doing an online appeal and you don't get to the confirmation page, you have not finished your appeal. You need to make sure you get that to show that you've appealed it. Okay, now we can do questions. Although I feel like there's a lot that I didn't cover.
So you mentioned that we don't have to have evidence when we submit the online application, but we do at the board. So let's say.
So she was saying, you said that she don't have to submit the evidence when you're doing the online application, but you do have to have it when you go before the board.
So the question is.
So the question is.
May sound really bad, but let's say your goal is to freeze it for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
You submit the application without providing evidence. You know your value of the home defense that you submitted it. And
let's say you're trying to freeze it, like you want to freeze the value.
Yeah.
Then
submit the application.
you submit the application.
You know you're gonna lose. I just want to make sure, am I going to get in trouble if I'm going to do something like this?
Oh, so she was saying, okay, so if you were in the space of needing the freeze, but you weren't sure of the evidence, if the evidence that you were going to submit is going to be enough to have you win at the Board of Equalization, would there be repercussions for like either not having evidence or like not having the right evidence or losing to the Board of Equalization?
As long as you appear, I'm sorry, as long as you appear at that hearing, you get the freeze. If you submit evidence, it allows you to submit evidence before the hearing. And so technically, if you submit evidence and don't show up, then they're supposed to consider that evidence. And so you would get the freeze. But I would be, to be on the safe side, I would show up. And there's no right or wrong evidence that, it's entirely what you can argue for, for it being a lower value. There's the rules of evidence don't apply. So you're not going to have someone say, oh no, that's hearsay. It's, whatever you have to suggest that it's a lower value, it's fair game. So, don't let that disturb you. And again, it's just you and 3 other taxpayers who are listening, and the appraiser who's arguing for his own value, which is also cherry picked. So.
Okay. Is there a limit on how many times you can appeal?
No, you don't want to appeal within the 3-year freeze, because if you appeal within the 3-year freeze, then you lose the freeze, and they can actually, that's one of the very limited exceptions to not being able. So normally if you appeal and go to the Board of Equalization, they cannot go above the amount that's in the notice of assessment. The big exception to that is that, if what's in the notice of assessment is a frozen value and you appeal again, you lose that frozen value, so they can go higher. And also if you bought your house for more than the notice of assessment value and you appeal, trying to get it even lower, they can actually go to the sales price. So those are the 2 things that you don't want to appeal. But for the most part, there's no limit on it.
Stacy, we've got some online about the billing at 85%. Can you be charged interest on the balance?
No, so the way it works is that your temporary tax bill is going to come out basically at last year's value. And then at the end of the appeal, when everything is done, at whatever stage the appeal ends, they're going to send a final bill, and you're going to have to pay that final bill within, I think it's 30 days to be able to, and if you do that, then you don't get charged any interest for it. If you don't pay it on time, or if you don't pay the temporary tax bill, then you will be charged interest.
Remind me, can we do the appeals virtually this year, or are they all in person now?
I believe they're going to retain both as an option. I know this year that you could choose one or the other. I will say that if they schedule you for an in-person hearing and you decide you want to do a virtual, then that's your one change. Like you have one chance to say, I want to reschedule this. And if you're rescheduling it so that it would be virtual, or in person, then that's your one change. And after that, you're going to have to live with whatever date they choose.
Okay, and there's one on here about whether the owner has to be present. They don't, but they do have to appoint. You do have to fill out a paper saying this is my authorized representative, and then you can send someone else instead of the owner.
Right.
Did the
Okay,
assessors
then we have
make, sorry.
Go right ahead. Go ahead.
A couple more online. Did the assessors make a distinction between finished and unfinished square feet?
Yes, that makes a difference in value. Obviously, finished square footage, a finished basement is going to be more valuable than an unfinished, or a finished attic versus an unfinished attic.
And then we also have this one I've been saving because I truly don't know about it. This person read on the Department of Revenue website that the assessed value of Georgia homesteads will be reduced by $18,000 due to a 2023 property tax relief grant.
Yeah, that's actually a special deduction, like a one-time thing that actually has nothing to do with the value or the homestead exemption.
If you're on a freeze, their question was, if you're on a freeze, do you get that reduction?
My understanding is yes, you do. It's just going to be across the board. They're going to take it out of what the taxable value is.
Okay, and then we have a couple more questions. With the freeze. Once you receive the freeze, and let's say it's been a year or so, Like, are you able to go through a process of unfreezing it? Is there an unfreeze that you're able to do? If so, how?
I mean, if you feel like that you can get it lower, you can try appealing again, you know, an appeal knocks out the freeze, but again, you run the risk of them, you run the risk of them raising it above what's in the notice of assessment value, because they're not locked in by that freeze anymore.
Okay, and then the other question is, so she's asking if at the workshop, will we actually be able to apply for the appeal and send them in? For the consultations, I'm sorry, and I can answer that. Yes, so at the consultation, you wanna make sure you bring your tax assessment, which will have your property ID number and your neighborhood code. So we're gonna do the evidence gathering. Some of that will help you with some of that ahead of time, so that when you do come to the consultation, we can go ahead, upload your documents. So make sure that you bring all those documents, and then we can actually like submit and apply for you. If for any reason we're unable to, like, let's say, press the submit button online, we'll still have paper copies that will allow you to fill everything out, and we'll send it with you, but you must put it in the mail and have it certified mail before the deadline to apply. Of course. And then I have one more. Oh, hold on. Oh, to unfreeze, I think she was saying you'll just have to like reappeal. There's not like an official unfreeze process. You would like have to reappeal it and see if you can get it lower. If not, like, I think that will unfreeze it. Is that correct, Stacey? That if
I mean,
you went
why are you trying to unfreeze it?
He was talking about if you potentially think that you could get the value lower, or you wanted to sell it or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to try and get the value lower, then you can appeal it again and try for a lower value, but you run the risk of it being actually higher. If you're wanting to sell it, the buyer is going to be driven by the market more than what's on the tax records. So I wouldn't worry about that.
And then out of respect, because it is 7:35, so I do want to go ahead for time, but I do want to say we do have consultation sessions and we have our one-on-one workshops. So if you feel that you would need some help to upload this, if you need some help in submitting, if you have more questions very specific to your actual tax appeal, I would suggest that you go ahead and take one of our flyers. I will follow up with you via email. It will have our consultation dates on there, but please register so that we can help you one-on-one with the actual consultation and actually be able to help you upload your appeal. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank Stacey, thank all of our community partners. Thank you so very much. And if you can please, if you haven't signed in already, please make sure to sign in. Yeah, and put your email, because that's going to be my best point of contact to be able to get all the information to you. And thank you online as well.
The URL to get all this information.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll show you. On the
It's Mary, I'm sorry, can you mute if you're not going to ask questions? I want to just real quickly say that I apologize. I guess I got too tied into how to do the research and we didn't get to a lot of the stuff that I would normally cover. You can look at last year's here recording for some of the other stuff. This is the first step. You get the appeal filed. The next thing is going to be a change or no change. You may have to appeal again. If you get another notice of assessment and you're not happy with that value, you need to appeal within 30 days. So you want to be aware of that. Hopefully we'll be doing another session that sort of gives what the next step is. So, you know, or at least doing a video to get you through the next step. But the important thing right now is just making sure that you get the appeal filed by the deadline, and then you can figure out all the rest of it later. So, thank you all. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to stick around.